3.
The Johnson family moved to Bullhead City, Arizona from California in 1973. Sue Johnson felt it was the perfect place to raise their children, 8-year-old Angel and 7-year-old Scott. Scott particularly liked the desert area surrounding their home. He often played with friends in an abandoned shack, previously used as a powder magazine 50 yards away. Tragedy struck on April 3rd, 1974, when at 3:30 p.m, the Bullhead City Fire Department was called to the shack, which was on fire. Inside, firefighters found the bodies of Scott and his 6-year-old friend Peter Hill, whose name was not mentioned in the broadcast. The two boys had burned to death. A few weeks later, the authorities ruled the death as an accident. They believed that the boys had been playing with gasoline and matches when they caught themselves on fire. Sue could not believe that her son had died accidentally. She felt that he and Peter would have been smart enough to simply leave the shack if it had caught fire. Fire Chief Larry Adams agreed with Sue and believed the fire was deliberately set. He noted that the doors to the shack had not been locked or obstructed in any way. A few feet from the door, he found a 2x12-inch wooden plank with a circle burned into one side. This indicated to him that someone prevented the boys from exiting the shack. He believes that the killer held the plank against the door to keep them inside because it was too hot for them to hold the metal door closed by their hands. Despite Larry's findings, police closed their investigation. Sue soon began an 18-year search for answers into the death of her son. In 1978, a convicted felon came forward, claiming that he witnessed Scott and Peter being thrown into the shack by two men. The felon's statement was backed up by the couple who reported the fire. Tina, Mo and John Callas were teenagers at the time of the fire. They remembered seeing one man standing next to the shack door and another man running up the hill away from them. Tina and John believed that the original investigators did not take them seriously because of their own troubles with the law. Sue and Larry were eventually able to convince the police that the deaths were homicides. She also located several witnesses to the possible murders. In 1989, a new police detective was able to get the case to be reopened as a homicide. However, much of the evidence from the deaths had been lost or destroyed, leaving police with little to go on unless a new witness comes forward. One theory is that the shack might have been a meeting place for a drug drop, and that Scott and his friend saw the incident transpire, resulting in their murders. However, 3 weeks prior to the fire, Scott and Peter found a $100 bill near the shack. Some suspect that the money was used for drug activity. In 1978, a convicted felon named Dale Gordon Meadle claimed to have information on the case. At the time of the fire, Meadle lived in Bullhead City. He told investigators that on the day of the fire, he had seen two men struggling with two young boys near the shack. He claimed that the men shoved both boys into the shack. One of the boys appeared to be drugged. He also saw one of the men carrying a gas can. Meadle claimed that he went up to the men and asked what was happening. One of the men told him that the boys had seen them smoking pot, and that they put the boys in the shack to keep them quiet. Meadle told the investigators that he later ran into one of the men while serving time in a Nevada prison in 1976. The inmate identified by Meadle, Mark Stumblefield, has been questioned, but no charges have ever been filed against this person. The couple who reported the fire to police backed up Dale's story, claiming that the two unidentified men were seen around the shack when it was set on fire.
2.
At 12:45 a.m. on the night of August 30th, 1990, Cheryl Lombardi found her 22-year-old son, Tony, shot to death in their home in Westerville, Ohio. Although the police ruled his death as a suicide, his family has found evidence that suggests that Tony was actually murdered. Tony was a fun-loving young man who was close to his family. At the time of his death, he was dating 3 different women who worked the swing shift at a baby food factory. On August 29th, he did not show up for work. Early the next morning, his mother found him dead. Investigators arrived at 1:15 AM and found that his car was missing from the garage. They presumed that it had been stolen by an assailant. On the bedroom floor they found a .38 caliber semi-automatic pistol. On the bed was a single spent .38 caliber shell. In his pants pocket they found a drunk driving citation. This led them to believe that Tony may have committed suicide over the citation. They learned that he had been arrested 2 days earlier for driving while intoxicated. They also learned that Columbus police had impounded his car at the time of his arrest. In addition, he faced fines and possible suspension of his driver's license. This led investigators to believe that he killed himself instead of facing legal problems. Tony's family does not believe that he committed suicide. Cheryl believes that her son was in a struggle with an unidentified assailant. His watch was broken and laying on the floor. He had an 1.5 inch gash over his left eye. He also had a broken jaw and bruises. He was discovered nude. She does not believe that he would want anyone to find him nude. An autopsy determined that he had died several hours before his mother came home at midnight. She believes that the killer was still in the home when she arrived. She could tell that the light was off when she came home. She claims that 45 minutes later, she heard a noise which led her to his body. She claims that the light was on when she found him. She believes that the killer turned on the light before he or she left. The police however claim that Cheryl did not tell them what she had heard that night, whether it be an environmental noise or a person leaving. His family claims that he was threatened multiple times prior to his death. They believe that one of the men that threatened him was the killer. A test was done on Tony's hands to determine if he had been handling a metal object prior to his death. The test confirmed that he had handled a metal object. However, Cheryl claims that this can be explained because he worked in a factory with metal cans and objects. His family is also suspicious about the position of Tony's body and the trajectory of the bullet. When Cheryl found him, 2 pillows were under his shoulders and his head was above the pillow. Investigators felt that the trajectory was consistent with a suicide. However, his parents found that the bullet hole was lower in his headboard than one would expect with his head above 2 pillows. Tony's family believed that the bruises on his chest were consistent with someone else holding him down before his death. The police, however, are convinced that his death was a suicide. The county coroner, the sheriff's department and the district attorney agree with this ruling. His family is certain that he was murdered and will continue to press for the case to be reopened. An unidentified man had been threatening Tony in the weeks before his death, and his family believes that this man killed Tony. A neighbour saw the man who was driving a white pickup truck. Tony apparently had cut the man off while driving. The man asked where he lived and he said that he lived at his home. Another man threatened Tony by leaving a message on the Lombardi's voicemail. The man said that he would shoot and kill him if he continued to see his girlfriend. Tony told his father not to worry about the threat. Tony's friend Andy tried to mediate, but the man said he still wanted to hurt Tony.
1.
Jill Bounds, Dallas, Texas. On September 20th, 1988, 41-year-old psychologist Jill Bounds spent a day at a hair salon and then, after shopping, went home and ate lunch. She then went to a market where she met several friends, walked through a local park and then went home at 4:15 PM, which was the last time she was known to be alive. A few days later, her friend Madeline Moore became worried when she did not get up early and go to work as scheduled. Madeline called the police, but since they couldn't break into her house, Madeline and a friend went inside and discovered her body on her bed, beaten to death. Her family and friends could not understand why she was murdered until they discovered that she had been involved in a spiritual movement called Conscious Movement of the Mind, Body and Soul, headed by Terry Hoffman, and they now believe that her involvement in the group may have led to her murder, but to this day it remains unsolved.